Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. Before we move into today's lesson, let's make sure we're on the same page. We've seen firsthand how much more is required to provide authentic leadership to a team than to simply manage based on the authority that comes with a title or a position. What we've learned through more than 50 combined years of leadership responsibility is that taking the extra steps to serve people and earn influence will always produce results that barking orders never will. And if you'll stick with us through the end of the episode, we'll share how you can get a complimentary trial to a resource we've built like nothing else you've ever seen. With that in mind, let's get to work. This is the second episode that really takes a hard look at the importance of starting at the top. And here we're really going to dig into how you can change your approach. If we want to have that exponential impact, I honestly don't believe that there's any other option than to buy into the idea that it all starts at the top. And while there's certainly going to be plenty of hard days in doing that, changing our approach that we take will be one of the most critical things that we can do when we're trying to address those profitability killers, especially the ones that have the highest risk in our organization. Because again, that top down cascades. That's where the exponential effect comes in. So let's go back to 2018 again. Cindy and I were working to, we decided that year we're going to build something called an executive summit onto the tail end of an already really full day leadership development event that we had hosted a couple of years at that point. And that particular session, that tail end session, was only going to be about an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And it was going to be geared at putting local business owners and other high-level executives in a small room together where Cindy and I facilitated roundtable discussions around very specific leadership topics that had been covered throughout the day leading up to that point. Now, we were really, really intentional about who we wanted to invite to be part of that session. So the main event that year, it had around 200 participants, I think from around 70 or so different companies. But this final 90-minute or so segment, it was going to be pared down to no more than 50 people. Ideally, it was going to be around 40. And we worked through the complete list of the attendees, and we identified the ones who had that level of responsibility that we were targeting for the type of interaction that we wanted this group to have. And in talking with each of them one-on-one, we were really intentional about that because it was by invitation only. We had those one-on-one conversations and we were explaining, here's what level of value we want this exclusive session to provide to each of them. The most common response that we received was that they had never seen an opportunity to be with a group of their peers where the sole focus was on leadership. Now, many of them at that point had been, their organizations were part of different industry-focused peer groups, but none of those groups had carved out specific time to really dial in on developing how they led their organizations, how to build stronger leadership cultures. From those conversations and that first executive summit session, Cindy and I went on to kind of create what we call today our Executive Leadership Elite Think Tank. Now, based on a clear need that we saw as we put that summit together, we went to work immediately. We were putting the criteria together for that Executive Leadership Elite Think Tank. And we really wanted to make sure we were providing a resource for local business owners and executives that would help them really key in on building a best-in-class leadership culture in their respective organizations and how they could show measurable return on the time and money that they invested to be a part of that group. I mean, when we met half a day once each quarter, and we did some different stuff outside of that, we wanted to make sure it wasn't just sucking up their already busy schedule, it was really delivering results. Now, here's where, one of the other things, I could go for days and talk about, here's the cool things that we've seen from it, the different relationships, the tangible results that they've achieved through it. I won't go down that rabbit hole. What I will tell you is that we've watched this be something that's productive, but we've also been able to develop it into a model that we can take for larger organizations, larger clients that we work with. And I'll stress that the primary thing is that we've always tried to hold a core principle for membership in that group, a strategic focus on leading rather than just supervising and managing the teams each member is responsible for. We set some of those criteria in place, but it was really about what's the thought process, not what are your financials, what are your teams. So when we set that, we had a baseline for the size, the minimum size of the organization, and that was largely based on a scene in the movie, I think from the 80s, called The Princess Bride, where there's a comment somewhere in there. It goes a little bit around the idea of you can't fight 5 men the same way you'd fight 1 man. And quite frankly, as we put that criteria in place, we were also less interested in the size and the revenue than we were in really ensuring that the thought process, again, tied back to a heart for leadership. Now, I've been around folks, and I say this frequently, I've been around folks that managed facilities with hundreds or even thousands of employees and did hundreds of millions in revenue that couldn't lead silent prayer. The team members in those organizations, though, I watched them. They were there for a paycheck, and when they got a comparable paycheck somewhere else, that's where they were going. Now, I've also had the pleasure of watching individuals with their primary goal of serving their team and the clients who did business with them, and I've watched those organizations in many cases grow exponentially. So that was kind of the criteria we set. And I'm sharing that with you because I believe if we want to have the best possible impact throughout our organizations and effectively deal with the things that kill so much profitability, we need to change the approach from managing the processes and procedures to leading the individuals that are really engaged in those processes and procedures. Now, I'm certainly not advocating here. I don't ever want to leave any confusion about this, that we no longer need to manage, but we've got to have a healthy mix, and that can make all of the difference. So it's not a question of either or. One of the most powerful lessons that I learned in the 15 years or so that I worked in behavior-based safety really had nothing to do with safety, and it was only indirectly related to human behavior. The lesson was in how much the act of serving other people impacted the influence an individual could build with the people around them through serving them. Now, the process that I had responsibility for, it was driven by a group of hourly shop floor employees. I was still, excuse me, I was still an hourly employee at the time, and we only had one one salaried individual that was even part of the process. And he kind of served as our management sponsor, if you will. He sat in on most of our committee meetings and so on. Now, these hourly team members from all areas of the facility, they had developed their skills in this really unique approach to safety. And I frequently saw their peers going directly to these folks as shop floor employees for help getting issues addressed, rather than following that traditional chain of command and asking their supervisor or manager to get those same things done, to get that same kind of support. Now, quite honestly, the folks that were engaged in this behavior-based safety process, they had really developed reputations for being able to get things done. And the results that they were responsible for achieving, it really did earn that authentic influence with the majority of the people working around them. And that was really a kind of influence that not all, and I'll go on to say not many of the supervisors or even managers had ever earned. Now, I'll share this quote again from John Maxwell, and I'll probably share it over and over and over. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. One of the most frequent complaints at that time that I was hearing from supervisors and managers throughout the facility, because I was responsible for the whole process, I was interacting with these folks on a daily basis, was that their direct employees were coming to our people that were involved in the behavior-based safety process with those issues instead of bringing them to them where they were supposed to go. Now, it really boiled down to their employees had at some point in time brought issues. Those issues are similar issues to them, but they hadn't really gotten resolution. And in many cases, they hadn't even gotten feedback on what was being done to address the issue or why something wasn't going to be done to address the issue. They just didn't hear it, kind of fell in the black hole, if you will. The hourly team members who were involved in that process with me, they had been empowered to take intentional action, or to take action and get results. And this is important, we made a point of being really intentional about following back up with the folks that brought the issues up, so we could say, here's what we've done, here's what we need to pay attention to, and let us know if this doesn't happen. And I'll tell you, that earned a whole different level of respect that's just never going to happen from that person that's named supervisor handing out job assignments at the beginning of the shift. That's not going to earn the same influence as getting results and doing this thing called listening to people, right? Now, to be completely fair, though, the ones that volunteered, that chose to be engaged in that safety process, they really had an unfair advantage. And it was one that I've seen very, very few organizations be intentional about providing to their supervisors and managers. It's also one that I'm trying to help organizations change. So like each of those active safety team members, the behavior-based safety observers, nearly every supervisor in the facility at that point in time, they had been extremely high performers in technical roles prior to being promoted into supervisor management roles. The difference that I saw was that we provided a tremendous amount of training and development on those softer skills, so to speak, for the folks in that behavior-based safety process. Now, soft skills were indeed occasionally mentioned, at least in passing, during those monthly safety supervisor meetings that I sat in on, but I rarely saw much focus given to them. It was kind of an afterthought. And oh, by the way, there was certainly no expectation for those supervisors and managers to really take action on it, even when we did talk about it, because they were just touched on briefly. Okay, back to business, go get results. Make no mistake here. I'm not suggesting that the work that they were doing wasn't critical. It absolutely was critical by looking at schedules, making sure things were reported accurately. There was a lot of importance in what they did. I am suggesting that we'll never be as effective as we can be with the teams we're responsible for when we're focused solely on that authority that comes with our position, instead of balancing that with a healthy dose of earned influence. And if we're serious about getting results, measurable results, by changing our approach, we definitely need to be experts at managing the processes and procedures we're charged with overseeing. But we can accomplish so much more and through our teams when we're just as effective at leading as we are managing the supervisor. Now, with that in mind, let's look at how quickly the results can follow when we bridge those gaps. So when I searched the phrase, I did an internet search, I looked for the phrase results of combining leadership and management. The vast majority of the links that I found were to articles that compared and contrasted the two. And I make a point as often as I can, and I'm as loud as I possibly can be when I'm emphasizing that adding manager to any title doesn't automatically mean that person's leading anything. It's just not, the two don't happen magically together. My main concern, as I read through so many of those articles, more than a dozen at that point, that came up in the search, was that nearly all of them focused almost entirely on only the contrasts of the two very, very different skill sets, instead of detailing how powerful the results can be when somebody becomes effective in both. Now, even the articles suggesting that these two different but critical skills could coexist, they alluded how rarely it really happens. And that bothers me a bunch, because I don't think it needs to be rare. So I found one from Harvard Business Review that opened with a quote from a fellow named Abraham Zalesnik in 1977. So that's what they were going back to. It said, business leaders have much more in common with artists than they do managers. What? And every single article in some form or fashion shared a variation of this statement from Inc.com, where it said, generally speaking, management is a set of systems and processes designed for organizing, budgeting, staffing, and problem solving to achieve the desired result of an organization. Leadership, it went on to say, defines the vision, mission, and what the win looks like in the future. It inspires the team to embody the beliefs and behaviors necessary to take the actions needed to achieve those results. Now, thankfully, that same article from Inc., which was appropriately titled, it was the only good one in the bunch that I found. It was appropriately titled, "The Fundamental Difference Between Leadership and Management: Combining Visionary Leadership and Great Management Achieves Winning Results." Pretty cool title, long title, but cool one. It closed with a section called the Power of Great Leadership and Management Combined. So it shared this. I'm going to read this to you because I thought it was a powerful paragraph. It said, when a company has great visionary leadership, poor management capability, the transformation will only get so far. When the opposite's true, the vision will not be powerful, or even worse, will be totally flawed. or it will never develop in the first place. With great leadership, but marginal management, the, the change effort can make significant gains, but it's eventually going to slow. Where the magic happens is when great leadership intersects with solid management. Change is messy and it's never perfect. It usually takes longer and has a greater cost, both hard and soft cost, than is originally anticipated. And as a quick side, John Maxwell's told us for years, usually takes twice as long and costs twice as much. Okay, that's a big deal here. But with visionary leaders, that article went on to say, who have the best interests of the company and its culture in mind, supported by great management throughout the company, winning results are likely to happen. Now, before we move on to how changing the approach we take by earning the genuine influence required to lead authentically while still effectively managing those processes produces those quantifiable results that we need so much across every area of our organization, I need you to understand that this is not some pie in the sky idea that only a select few people will ever be able to achieve. It's not something we need to ascend to. It's not this walk on water thing. Just like none of us were born knowing all that we do today about running our respective departments or entire businesses, nobody came out of the womb as an amazing leader. Both skill sets, those technical skills as well as the leadership skills, can be and absolutely need to be developed intentionally over time. Now, the biggest difference that I've seen is that most organizations have processes in place to help us grow into effective supervisors and managers. I won't pretend that developing our leadership skills to mirror those management skills is something that's going to be easy, but I promise you it's not complicated. And for what it's worth, though, not effectively dealing with those profitability killers like that poor communication, the low engagement, and the high turnover, gosh, that ain't easy either. That's really stinking hard. So what I'll ask you to consider as we're moving on is, if both options really are hard, both are going to be hard, dealing with the bad results or developing strong leadership, doesn't it make sense to pick the hard option that really gives you the results you want?
Thanks for listening to the Leading at the Next Level podcast. Next time, we'll pick up where we left off by digging into how you can capture your best return. If you'd like to go deeper into anything we've shared here, or you need continuing education credits for your professional credential, send us an email at admin@dove-development.net, and we'll be happy to hook you up with a 45-day all-access trial to our complete Leading at the Next Level program at no cost. The full program includes access to well over 100 hours of digital lessons, complete with slides and action-based assessments to help you capture measurable bottom-line improvements in your organization. And it also offers 2 live lessons each month with Q&A, so we can help you identify the specific action you want to take to lead your team more effectively.